Good afternoon. My name is Mike Carney, and we're here in the lovely city of Baltimore, Maryland, and it's my pleasure this afternoon to introduce you to Mr. Hugh McMillan, ASHRAE president during the year 79-80. And Hugh, welcome to Baltimore, and thank you for joining us today.
Glad to be here.
Good. Hugh, can you tell us a little bit about your walk through the various chairs and committees of ASHRAE that led you to the presidency?
Well, I was a student at Texas A&M, and we had the first, so we didn't call it a student chapter, we called it a student branch at that time. And joined the ASHRAE student chapter there. And subsequent to that, moved to Houston and went to work down there. And we, as a student member, we were able to go right into a chapter without paying any special society dues for the first year. And so I got introduced to ASHRAE there, and I kind of liked it. I was also a member of ASME, which you normally are if you take mechanical engineering, and I went to some chapter meetings of ASME and found that I liked it was ASH and VE at that time, and I liked them much better because of their friendliness and openness and so forth. So stayed in, worked in the chapter. Of course, they give you every kind of job they can at that time, from bartender and ticket salesman and all that sort of thing.
Well, that's good training for a young engineer.
But in about 1955 or so, I was standing for election for Board of Governors, and at that time, the nominating committee didn't control that level, and we actually ran for election at the first level there at Board of Governors. And an interesting thing happened after we had the election for the new member of the Board of Governors. Well, we were in a dead heat. And so the tellers came out and announced that we had a tie, and I realized that time that I had actually voted for the other guy, you know. It's sort of a courtesy, you know, and a matter of friendship and so forth. But changed my vote.
Did he vote for you?
Well, I don't know. Well, I don't think he did because of the count that we got after I voted for myself, and I just barely beat him. So, you know, I reflect on that sometimes and realize that maybe if I hadn't won an election, I may not have gone on in ASHRAE. Or it was ASH and VE at that time. And then I proceeded through the chairs and became president of the Houston chapter in 1959 to 60. At that time we were merging. We changed the name of our society from ASH and VE to ASHAE, and they merged with, at that time, with ASRE. And so I shared the office of president. He was president for the RE local president was president for the first 6 months, and I was president for the second 6 months. We got the merger through in about 3 or 4 years, taking all of the officers and working them all through the chairs, 6-month terms of office.
How did that work practically? The splitting of the presidency into 6 months tours of office, it would seem to me that would have been a difficult adjustment.
It was a short term, but we sort of worked together the whole year, and with the RE person was a titular head for the first 6 months, and I the second 6 months. We kind of flipped a coin to find out, figure out who was going to go
where. Yeah.
But it worked out fine, and we all knew each other. We were in the same industry, basically, so it worked real smooth. It was sort of an embarrassing deal for RE. They were about to go broke, frankly, and they had to do something. Their only alternative was to merge.
All right. You were still working at the chapter level then when the society became known as ASHRAE.
Yes.
Okay. And then what led you out of the chapter? How did you get to?
Well, of course, finishing that, a few years later, I attended a lot of the CRCs. Enjoyed that very much, and took my wife. She enjoyed that.
Yeah.
And for a number of years, and just kind of, I guess I became generally known, and I developed a reputation, good or bad, during that period of time. And in '66, I was the general chairman of the national meeting in Houston. Mm-hmm. So I got to know quite a few other people.
All right, so you were involved at the chapter level and then became involved through the CRCs with the work of the society nationally.
I was general chairman of the society meeting in Houston in 1966, and so I got to know a lot of the officers and directors of the society then.
Uh-huh.
And we completely financed our deal and sent some money back, which was almost unheard of. And so I had a sort of a backer there. You know, you talk about people. I had a backer in Houston, Clarence Fleming, that happened to be on the nominating committee, and he'd been trying to want to know if I would serve as a director at large, you know.
Uh-huh.
And I told him I would. And after I wasn't too sure if I wanted to do it or not, because by that time I had my own business and was working pretty hard in that. But I told him I'd do it, and then, by golly, I was nominated in about 1967. I was nominated a year before that, and then went on to serve in that capacity from 67 to 70.
Okay.
And after that, I spent about a year. I thought my career in ASHRAE was over.
You paid your dues at that time, huh?
I did not get renominated for anything, and so. And I want to say this: I never really wanted or actively sought nomination for anything.
Uh-huh.
I just never did. And some people, find that a little bit incredulous, but it's true.
Uh-huh.
I just never have really wanted to. I didn't have a burning desire to get out here and someday be president of ASHRAE or go through all those chairs.
That's really not unusual. Most of the fellows that we've had the privilege of interviewing reflect the same thing, that the job, in fact, seeks the man. It hasn't.
Well, I'm not surprised at that.
No, it's been not a reluctance necessarily, but almost always a surprise.
Well, it was.
Yeah.
It was to me.
Yeah.
But about a year after not being in anything, I did some committee work in there.
Yeah.
That's something. That's actually work. But a year after that, the director and regional chairman job in Region 8 came open, so I was nominated for that.
I see.
Served in that for 3 years, and I had a year or two that I was off after that in committee work again. And also one of the committees was the Finance Committee. Of course, now I'd had 6 years experience on the board, so I had a pretty good idea how the thing worked. But the Finance Committee was, I think, probably more of a training program at that time to learn how the finances of the society worked, and and when you know how the finances in any operation works, then you know how the whole thing works.
Uh-huh.
So served in that, and then shortly thereafter was nominated for treasurer of society, which now is seemingly a higher office. I thought it should be at the time. But it was a higher office than vice president. It carried with it a lot more responsibility, I thought. So I served in that, and then went right straight on up from there to president. through the president-elect route, of course.
Yeah.
You nominated for president-elect, that's president.
Yeah.
That's really what it is.
Yeah. Before we get into your accomplishments and observations during your presidency, which of the jobs that you've held within ASHRAE have been the most challenging and rewarding?
Actually, two jobs. Well, three jobs. Regional chairman, that's more of a people-to-people type operation. That's where the rubber hits the road. Sort of, you're the bishop going around calling on all of the churches,
yeah,
keeping them in line, and that's a pretty hard job.
It still is a challenging job in the society.
And then when I became, there were some other jobs were very interesting. I'm not trying to take away from them at all. But then as president-elect, then you're also chairman of what at that time we called Region Central Committee, which was a committee consisting of the regional chairmancy.
Mm-hmm.
Now that I enjoyed that very much. Enjoyed that very much, doing that. And probably, though, the most challenging was during that year as president-elect was preparation of my presidential year, recognizing some of the things that I felt needed to be done, not just that I felt, but other people in society felt, and planning for that and then actually accomplishing it during the president-elect year and the presidential year.
You mentioned earlier, Hugh, the importance of planning for your presidency during the year that you are president-elect. Would you elaborate on that?
And a little bit before. As soon as you find out that you are going, I think that any president-elect, a fellow that knows that he's going to be president-elect and ultimately president, if the job doesn't kill him, see, then he needs to start immediately to plan what he wants to accomplish, recognize the things that he sees that he'd like to get done, and like for the society to get done.
Would you talk to us a little bit about the things that you planned and felt you accomplished during your presidency?
There were several things. During my service, prior to, as the director and regional chairman and director and treasurer, I recognized that there are several things that I felt like needed to be changed. And first, in terms of the business that we did on the board of directors, we just were trying, it was paralysis by analysis, what I thought. In that thing. The meetings began early and they lasted late. Sometimes we would stop to do a social function at 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening and go back in at 7 o'clock at night and keep the meeting going to 1 or 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, which I thought was ridiculous. So what we were ending up doing was committee work on the board, and we shouldn't do committee work on the board. So I felt like that we needed to change the organization of the society somewhat so that we could relegate everything down to its lowest level. In other words, if an individual member can make a decision to do something, let him do it. If a certain committee can do something, let them do it. Let's don't pass it all up to the board to figure out what to do. So that was one of the things I had in mind changing. And then another thing was that we had no energy policy, and at that time that was very critical in our country. Remember the oil shortage, and the dollar, a gallon of gasoline had been selling for 39 or 35 or something. Now it was a buck, and we just thought that was terrifically high. And we were talking about maybe oil going to $100 a barrel. So energy conservation was very important, and and an energy policy statement by the society I felt was very important. Then we had very little society planning, in my opinion. We had a long-range planning committee, but they frankly didn't do much planning, and it wasn't because I don't think that they didn't want to. I think they just didn't have the thing geared up to do it, you see. So we were kind of like a ship without a rudder. I mean, everything was ad hoc. If we had to get something done, well, we had to just do it on the spur of the moment. When the emergency arose, well, we took care of it. So I felt like that some amount of planning and thought needed to go in as where we wanted to take the society, or where the society was going to take us, or whatever, however you want to put it, and then put that all in writing and develop a plan. See?
Oh, all right. And if you would tell us a little bit about how you went about doing that.
Set up an MBO setup, which is management by objectives. We first, during my presidential year, and I want to tell you, hasten to add that this has been greatly improved upon since I left office, but and they've gotten a lot more sophisticated with it. Since when I left it, I mean when I was there, we made each committee chairman tell me some of the objectives that he thought he ought to have, and then we'd approve them, I'd approve them, or the president-elect would approve them, and we'd send them back down and make them give a report at the end of the year and the interim too, in the mid-year term, as to what had been accomplished so far and what percentage they were along on accomplishing all these goals. So we were able to take care of that in that manner. It was a pretty simple manner, but we did it. Then, in order to change the society organization, we set up a committee of Don Bonfleth and Bill Chapman and some others to discuss how we might change that deal. And I had in mind, and I kind of gave them some instruction, well, look, what we want to do is we want to develop a committee system much like Congress, so that they can really make all the decisions in these committees, and then they just bring the results to us and we yay or nay them. So, but they went a step farther, which really will enable this society to grow almost without bounds, and they have another layer of management in there that does the approval, and they bring it to them. So they handle a lot of
the other layer, what we call the council now.
The councils layer.
That's correct.
Yeah. They brought that.
They group activities under one table.
That's correct. It brings the groups of a similar kind onto one table, and then the councils bring all that stuff to the board now. I didn't really want it to be quite that sophisticated, but it's worked out very, very well.
Yes, this process that we call ASHRAE is very interesting. There's real work accomplished by this group.
Well, there is a lot of work, and that's the reason for the committees to discuss these issues in great detail. And of course, what my idea was to get that away from the board and back down the committee.
Yes.
While we were on the board, a lot of times the directors at large would bring their chairman in, and when I became president, to make all the presentations, I just told them, if you want to bring the guy in from your committees, you bring him in as backup, but you will make the presentation. And so, boy, we kept him sharp then, see, and to the point, and we got our job done. It just worked a lot better. And hopefully they're still doing that. I don't go to many board meetings anymore, but I'm sure they are. I know they don't have any nocturnal meetings.
Is that right?
Anymore, no.
Yes, and now they've sort of cut out the presidential suite bar a little bit at this meeting.
That's right.
Is that what we've done?
Well, we had to have that bar. I mean, the meetings lasted so long we were exhausted. We had to get rejuvenated in there, see?
Well,
some other things that I noted was overcrowded facilities in New York City at the Engineering Center. We had 64 people and 8,000 square feet. We had people out in the elevator lobby and in the halls within our space. And we just had to do something about it. And at that time, we were paying $100,000 a year, let's say $108,000 a year rent to the United Engineering Center for rent, which was a good deal on rent for New York City. But it would appear that we were going to have to start paying $25 a square foot, and we needed about 20,000 square feet. So you can see that the rent was fixing to go up pretty high. And we couldn't find anything in New York City. And we had so many people that complained about going to New York City, you know, with the cost of housing and all that sort of thing for meetings. So during this period of time of, you might say, gestation of these ideas, I decided that let's try and see if we can't find another place to locate. We looked at a number of different places. But during my presidential year, I set up a committee to look into locations. We brought it down to 3 or 4. And it really came down between, Washington, D.C. came in about third, because they were really set up for organizations like this. We got a lot of personnel available. Thing that I think knocked them out was the cost of housing in the area, and rent wasn't all that bad, but housing was pretty, you know, and the cost of personnel was high. Then we came down between Dallas and Atlanta. And of course I had my own wishes, but I took myself out of the loop.
Coming from Houston.
Guess where, you know. But we lost in a real close vote, and the reason being, and it was made good sense, it was relatively close to Washington, D.C. And another one of my programs was to establish a Washington presence, because I recognized that nobody in Washington knew anything about ASHRAE. They knew a lot about ASME and ASCE and IEEE and all these other so-called founder societies, but they didn't know anything about us. So I felt for a relatively small investment, we could start a presence there, and we now have a Washington office.
Did you do that by starting with Mr. Cox?
We had to fund it and vote it and all this good stuff, but we made a search and found Mr. Cox.
Okay, because that's been a very important initiative on the part of the society.
I think it is. Yeah. And we have to kind of tiptoe through the daisies there, because we don't want to be doing lobbying, even though we're authorized. We can do up to 5% of our budget lobbying. We don't do anywhere near that. But we're not lobbying. We are there for technical assistance, not to influence legislation and all that sort of stuff, even though, you know, we certainly do.
Yes.
But I felt like that was a very important thing. And these ideas that I'm telling you, not all mine. I'm not that brilliant. But I had a lot of people come to me and talk to me about these things. You know, about the Washington presence, and you know, boys, we need to do something about headquarters location. And
Hugh, during your presidency, the investigation of alternative headquarters sites resulted in the move itself, did it not?
We did not. Well, we bought the property.
Okay.
But we didn't actually move. We moved in about 5 or 6 months after my term ended, because we bought a used building. We had to refurbish the building and get it all set up. So it took us, you know, a little while to do that. So we moved on down there, and everything worked out real good. I feel like it was a good investment, and we sold it. I can guarantee you we saved money.
Even though Atlanta isn't as close to Houston as Dallas might have been, looking back at it, do you think that was a good decision?
I think it was a good decision. I really do.
Yeah.
even though now you can go nonstop to Washington National Airport from anywhere in the United States almost. But at that time, they had an FAA ruling that coming into Washington National, you couldn't have a flight over 500 miles. See, so I think Atlanta, I believe it's 500. Atlanta just barely got under that mileage, so you go nonstop between Atlanta and.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
I didn't realize there was such a.
Well, yeah, oh yeah.
You really looked at quite a number of parameters while you studied this move, didn't you? When you were evaluating.
We did. Well, we had to. And is it a quality city? Do they have things like professional sports, and do they have so we get good people on staff. So you can't go into some 25,000 people town, and maybe is there a symphony in there, and all that sort of thing. We looked at every bit. Quality of life was a very important part of it. Cost of housing. People that moved down from New York City on the staff, and that's another story. When they moved down, they actually came out very well financially. Those that owned property in New York City and sold it, and we guaranteed to buy it at an average price, of average appraised with 3 appraised prices. And they usually sold it for more than those appraisals. But they came down and bought, as we say down in Texas, they started living high on the hog down in Atlanta. Real nice homes and all that money to buy the homes with, see. So their quality of life, I'm very confident, improved by moving down there. And we lost only one person we really wanted to keep, and Director of Standards. But we got a replacement for him, and everything's just working fine.
How do you view the society now?
Bill Chapman said it like this. He said, ASHRAE is a magnificent society. And the reason it's magnificent is not because we make a lot of money, even though we're not hurting for money as a society, but it's because of the people we have in it. It's a people society, and we have so much commitment and dedication of our members, which other societies, similar societies, just don't have. And we have people that really will come in and work harder at society business than they do at the jobs, which is pretty important. You have to kind of watch that a little bit. Yeah. But we have some of the most highly qualified people in the world to call on. And while I was president, I was able to call on people that certainly tremendously more qualified in the particular field I was talking about than I, and which was just a blessing. I never was turned down by anyone.
You mentioned earlier, Hugh, that some of us can get involved in ASHRAE and actually work harder in the ASHRAE job than we do at our own job, and the need to protect yourself from that. Can you elaborate on that for us?
It's a problem, and it's the one that accepts a position of that kind of responsibility really needs to look at before he takes on the responsibility. First of all, if you, as president, for example, or let's say a president-elect or chairman of the R&T committee or chairman of the standards committee or something like that, where there's just so much activity, they need to make sure that they know everything. If they run their own business,